Welcome in, everyone. Ready to go beyond the headlines with us today?
Always up for a deep dive, especially one this notorious.
Then buckle up, because we're dealing with Ed Gein.
Oh yeah, that name sends shivers down your spine, even if you think you know the story.
It's one of those cases that stuck with me,
Yeah.
This is just some rip from the headlines thing. Gein's echoes are everywhere, especially in horror movies.
And for our deep dive today, we're drawing from the Real Stories Tapes true crime series on YouTube. Their episode on Gein is particularly good.
I had chills watching it. Just the way they get into the setting, small town 1950s Wisconsin, really sets the stage.
Yeah, Plainfield. See, that's almost scarier than if it were some anonymous city. Everyone knew Gein, liked him apparently. It's all quiet, friendly, had a joke when they describe him.
Makes your skin crawl knowing what was going on at his farm, though, right? Like that whole thing about the skin mask.
You almost have to wonder about people sometimes after cases like this. But see, that's where unpacking it gets really interesting. Gein wasn't some obvious monster, at least not outwardly. So, where did it all go wrong?
Well, they say it starts at home, right? And for Gein, his upbringing was intense, to say the least. Isolated on that farm, domineering mother. The documentary makes it clear his social development was basically stunted.
Imagine, your whole world is this tiny farm, your mom's the main, maybe only person you interact with. Not exactly a recipe for healthy relationships later in life.
And then there's that whole Oedipal complex angle the experts bring up.
Yeah, now that's getting into some deep psychology. Basically, the theory is about an unconscious desire for your opposite sex parent. So with Gein, super close to his mom, isolated from everyone else, you can see how that can warp things.
A recipe for disaster, you could say?
Yeah.
And for Bernice Worden, that's exactly what it became. This is where the story takes a turn, and honestly, it gets pretty rough. Bernice Worden's murder wasn't just some local news item, it shook Plainfield to its core.
Right, and the filmmakers really do a good job conveying that. I mean, just picturing it.
Her body in Gein's shed, hanging upside down. They said the police at first thought it was a deer. Can you imagine?
It's that level of brutality that sets Gein apart. This wasn't some bar fight gone wrong. This was deliberate, methodical almost.
And that's what's so creepy, right? Everything they found at the farm pointed to that. Trophies from bodies, furniture covered in skin. There was even talk of a skin suit.
See, that's where you got to start looking deeper into the psychology, right? This wasn't just about killing. Gein was trying to possess, to recreate.
Which, the documentary points out, might tie back to that whole Oedipal thing we talked about. Some experts think he was trying to literally become his mother in some twisted way.
Disturbing stuff. And then you add in that anecdote about the neighbor eating soup out of a bowl made from a victim's skull.
Chills, man.
This wasn't some boogeyman in the woods. He was part of the community. That's what makes it hit so hard, you know?
It really makes you question everything, everyone you think you know. But hold on to your hats, because as twisted as things are now, the full picture of Gein's crimes, we're just scratching the surface. We always hear about body counts with these kinds of cases, like some gruesome scorecard. But with Gein, it wasn't the number of victims that got to me, it was
the way he went about it, right? Like, this wasn't just opportunity knocking like a lot of serial killers.
The documentary made a point of saying that Gein was targeting specific graves, middle-aged women, recently deceased.
Yeah, the Real Stories tapes, folks really hit on that. It adds a layer of premeditation that's just not chilling. This was a plan, almost like some twisted shopping list, you know?
And the women he chose, they weren't random. They always mentioned how they tended to resemble his mother.
Further fueling that whole Oedipal complex theory. This wasn't just morbid curiosity, it was a need to replace, to possess, almost.
And the documentary talks about Gein's background on the farm, how that played into it, which is just... He knew how to butcher, how to work with his hands, and those skills.
Yeah, not something you want to imagine. And then there's that part about his reading material, medical textbooks, alongside pornography. Like, he was trying to understand, but through this really distorted lens.
Trying to rebuild something, maybe? But using the wrong tools in the worst way possible.
A broken mind, for sure. And it's tough, you know? Because as awful as it was, the story didn't end there. The house burning down, people still going to that empty lot. It became this whole other thing.
Like a morbid tourist attraction. It's that weird thing, we're repulsed but fascinated all at once. The documentary even talked about how this case, with Gein's car being sold as a sideshow thing, kind of kicked off murderabilia as we know it.
People wanting a piece of that darkness. It's creepy, no doubt. But it also shows how much this stuff gets under our skin, why we're still talking about it. Gein's fingerprints are all over horror movies, even today.
Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That whole image of the loner, the house full of secrets, maybe wearing someone's skin, it all traces back in some way to Ed Gein.
He's like the blueprint for our nightmares, and I think that's what sticks with you, Was he born evil? Or did that awful childhood, the isolation, create it? And if someone like that could exist in a town like Plainfield, could it happen anywhere? That's the question that keeps me up at night. Until next time, everyone, keep it locked and keep those lights on.